eventually our application always became big. And then there are side effects everywhere. And this is hard to maintain. And also it's hard to add feature and so on. So what we want to do, we want to reduce, control, and observe side effects. So the idea is to use a bit different pattern. Maybe we can go back in time, Middle Age. This is a small town, Monteriggioni near Siena in Italy. So they build a wall around the town, and there is only one gate where things can go through. So we can make our application like this, so that all our side effects go through the gate. And maybe we put a knight there that observe all these side effects. So let's look at the definition of side effect. This is what we can find on Wikipedia. It's kind of official definition, but maybe we need something a bit more practical that we can use every day. So a function is something that takes an input and return an output. But in reality, every function actually has two sets of input and two sets of output. This concept is coming directly from a talk of Chris Jenkins. So if you want to learn more, he explained this much better than me. And so those extra inputs are secret. So the way we can define side effects is the hidden inputs and outputs that a function secretly depends on. So let's see if this function is a bit more practical than the other one. So let's look at this example. Where is the secret input? Can you find it? So this is a function that takes a list of messages and filter and only return the new one. So the secret input is here because it's something that we get directly from the middle of the function, but it's not passed to the function. So this is the situation, okay? How can we improve the situation? Well, it's quite simple. We pass the date as an argument instead getting automatically from inside the function. Let's see another example of a function that has a secret input and output. So this function, for example, JSON parse, is throwing if you don't pass a correct JSON string. This is a secret output because we don't know unless we know how the function works. So we cannot see just looking at it. How do we solve it? Well, we can transform, instead using the throwing, we transform the error into a value. So now just looking at the function, we know that this function can cause an error. This is another example. This is a function that go and change a global variable. A side effect. How can we avoid this one? Is to use immutable data. If we use immutable data, function cannot change any global variable. So we already saw three ways of dealing with this situation. One is making secret more explicit. The other one is to transform things like exception, error rules to data type, and then using immutable data. Let's see also how can we reorganize the code. So this is the function we saw before. We can split in two. We can separate the part that has no side effect, and then we have, of course, another part that has side effect. Side effect eventually cannot be completely removed, but we can do this split. So let's suppose this is our application. There are side effects everywhere. So we do the split, and we start to separate function with and without side effect, and we organize the code more and more, and we push all the side effects on the edge until we reach this situation. So next part, if you want to observe those, we just make them all go through the same place. So then we put our knight we saw before next to the gate so we can see them all. This is referred as a functional core imperative shell. It's quite a well-known concept. You can find it everywhere if you Google it. Let's see some of the benefits. These are not all the benefits. Testability. Again, this is the example we saw before. I don't need to explain you that this function is much easier to test it because you pass the date. So in general, all the functions that are in the core, the functional core, are simple to test. You don't need to write mocks, or you don't even need to wait for time to go by. And the other one is more difficult to test. What I mean we don't need to wait is because if you have a regular function with side effect, and the function maybe depends on time, maybe I have to wait 10 seconds, then you really have to wait 10 seconds before testing, before the test finish. If you have a function without side effect, you can travel in time. You can jump into the future, you can just set the clock 10 seconds ahead, and the test is immediate. Composability is quite simple. If you have a function that has a secret input or output, you cannot compose them together. But if they don't have secret input output, you can do that. Of course, you need to be sure that the output is the same type of the input of the next function. Let's see some possible approaches. So one is do-it-yourself solution. Again, all the things we saw before. You do it yourself, you reorganize the code, and you achieve this level. Another possibility is using tools. So you can use TypeScript that helps, and there are libraries like Effect.js. It has a lot of things built in. For example, it has error handling, an effect type. You can also compose those effects. It has several immutability data structure like chunk and hash set, and also has a width span that is an observer for effect. And the last option is to use a functional language, Elm, for example. In this case, the shell is completely included in Elm. It's the Elm runtime. You don't need to touch the shell at all. You only write inside the functional core. In Elm, the functional core is sometimes referred as the Elm architecture. So, of course, again, these are not solutions. There are only trade-offs, and these are the more or less how could you draw on the spectrum. And if we analyze some of the trade-off, for example, discipline, it means how much you have to be careful. Of course, if you do it yourself, you have to be very careful, especially JavaScript. For example, it's always hard to tell if your function is muting the parameters that are coming in. I can never remember if a function is doing that. On the other side, everything is taken care of by the compiler, so you can be the most undisciplined developer and it's still okay. There is more work that you need to do if you don't use tools, of course. If you use tools, of course you have to learn those, but then they will make your life easier. And of course, but if you use tools, you have to learn, and they are not familiar. So on that side, you have JavaScript. Everybody knows JavaScript. This is TypeScript. On this other side, you need to learn a new paradigm and also new syntax and so on. So let me show a quick demo. This is an Elm application built in Rakuten. So there is an interface here. There is a dashboard there, and then you just click on some of the messages, and then you get the list of all the side effects. And here, for example, is a network request. Okay, so we can see them all. And this is an example of a response that we get, and this is a success, so we get an OK. And here we can see the side effect on the state of our application. So we move from fetching to OK. And the view, so the HTML is generated by a pure function, so the state of the application is reflected into the interface. So that was the fetching state, and this is the loaded state. This is an example of getting an error. So in this case, the state changed from closed. We have an overlay state here, that is the model, changed from closed to open. And the interface, this is how we show the error. This is an example of a retry system. So we set up a retry system like for retry and so on. And so this is a case where we get an error from the first request. And here we can see an example of composing effects. So we have an effect here, it's called effects with delay, that actually run other effects. So effects can be composed. In this case, we are saying, please wait 500 milliseconds and after send another effect that is the network request. And after 500 milliseconds, we send that request. If there is another failure, then we use the same things, and then now we wait for 1000 milliseconds. Yeah, so this is how controlled and observable side effect may look in practice. And yeah, and this is all I have for you today. Thank you very much.